The taxi driver refused to take her past the fork, so Mira Keller walked the last 3 miles with her survey case slung across her back and dusk bleeding purple across the hills. She had found the estate on a crumbling 1790 cadastral map in the county archive, labeled simply Alaric Holdings, with meticulous property lines and a long access road that should have intersected the modern highway exactly where she had started walking. Every map after 1805 showed empty forest. No sale record, no demolition permit, no transfer of deed. The land had simply been erased from every survey, every GPS satellite image, every digital record, as if the earth itself had conspired to forget. Mira had restored 17 lost properties to modern survey databases in her 5-year career. This was just another puzzle, she told herself, even as the road beneath her boots grew older, the asphalt cracking into cobblestone and then into hard-packed dirt that should not exist on any 21st-century thoroughfare. The trees pressed close, their branches woven so thick overhead that the dying light barely touched the ground. The locals in town had stared when she asked about the old Alaric estate. One woman, gray-haired and stern-faced, had leaned across the diner counter and said, "No woman's ever found that place and come back to tell of it." Then she had turned away. Conversation finished. Professional stubbornness had always been Mira's greatest asset and worst flaw. She kept walking. The gates appeared so suddenly she nearly collided with them. Wrought iron, 15 feet tall, worked into patterns of thorns and nightshade, stretching between stone pillars that looked older than the Republic. Beyond them, a long drive wound through manicured grounds toward a mansion that belonged in a European Gothic fantasy, all dark stone and soaring windows and castellated towers catching the last blood-red light of sunset. And standing directly in front of the gates, as if he had been waiting for her specifically, stood a man who could not possibly be real. White hair fell past his shoulders, pure as snow, framing a face of such severe, elegant beauty that Mira's breath caught. Pale skin, luminous in the twilight, eyes like winter storms, gray and depthless and fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel pinned, catalogued, known. He wore clothing that looked simultaneously antique and perfectly tailored. A long black coat over a white shirt, dark trousers, boots that might have been custom-made a century ago and preserved in pristine condition. "You found me," he said, and his voice was low and rich and carried an accent she could not place, something old-world and refined. Mira straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "I found an estate that's been illegally removed from public land records. I'm here to update the county survey." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or amusement. He moved closer to the gate, and she noticed he walked with absolute silence, no crunch of gravel, no displacement of air. "And you are?" "Mira Keller, licensed cartographer and land surveyor." She pulled her credentials from her jacket pocket, holding them up even though the light was too dim for him to read them from that distance. "The property records show this estate was registered in 1790 under the name Alaric Holdings. Are you the current owner?" "I am Wolfram Alaric," he said, and the way he said it suggested that should mean something, carry weight. "And I am the only owner this estate has ever known." That was impossible. 1790 was 236 years ago. But Mira had learned in her work that families often spoke of ancestral property in possessive terms, conflating their own identity with that of long-dead predecessors. "Then you inherited from your ancestors. I'll need to see the deed transfer documents." "There are no transfers," Wolfram said quietly. "I built this house in 1789. I laid the first stone myself." Mira's hand moved instinctively to her phone, ready to document what was clearly either a disturbed individual or an elaborate historical reenactor. But her phone screen was black, dead despite being fully charged when she left the taxi. She pressed the power button. Nothing. "Electronics fail here," Wolfram said, watching her. "The estate does not welcome modern technology or modern visitors." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Yet you walked 3 miles in failing light to reach a place you were warned against finding. Why?" "Because it exists," Mira said simply. "Because the land is real and should be recorded accurately." Because truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. For a long moment, Wolfram simply looked at her, and Mira had the unsettling sensation that he was reading something written beneath her skin, cataloging not just her words, but the architecture of her thoughts. Then, with emotion so slight she almost missed it, he raised one pale hand, and the gates swung open without a sound. "Come inside, Mira Keller," Wolfram said. "Since you have done what no woman has managed in 2 centuries, the least I can do is offer you hospitality before you begin your survey." Every instinct she had learned in 5 years of visiting abandoned properties told her to refuse, to leave, to come back with witnesses and daylight and working phones. But Mira had also learned to trust her professional curiosity, and this estate represented the most significant cartographic mystery she had ever encountered. She stepped through the gates. The grounds were immaculate in a way that suggested constant, invisible maintenance. The grass was precisely trimmed, the hedges shaped into geometric perfection, the gravel paths raked smooth. As she walked beside Wolfram toward the mansion's entrance, Mira tried to estimate property value and failed utterly. The building alone would be worth millions, the land potentially more, but none of it appeared on any tax roll, any assessment record, any database she had ever accessed. "How is this possible?" she asked, gesturing at the estate. "How can something this size simply not exist in any modern system?" "I made it not exist," Wolfram said, as if this were a reasonable answer. "I removed it from every map, every record, every chain of reference. I hired surveyors to redraw the boundaries, cartographers to omit the roads, clerks to lose the documents. It took 30 years of meticulous work, but I erased myself from the world's memory." He glanced at her. "You are the first to undo that work." "The 1790 cadastral map," Mira said, understanding flooding through her. "It was filed before you began the erasure. I found it in a box of water-damaged documents the county was going to destroy. I dried it, restored it, digitized it." "Of course," Wolfram said, and there was something bleak in his voice. "One always misses something. 200 years of perfect isolation, undone by water damage and professional diligence." They had reached the mansion's entrance, a massive door of dark wood bound with iron. Wolfram opened it with a touch, and warm light spilled out, along with the scent of old books and wood smoke and something else, something faintly metallic that Mira could not identify. The interior was breathtaking. A grand entrance hall rose 3 stories, lit by chandeliers that held what looked like actual candles, their flames casting dancing shadows across marble floors and tapestried walls. A sweeping staircase curved upward to galleries lined with paintings, and through open doorways Mira glimpsed a library, a sitting room, a dining hall, all furnished with antiques that looked simultaneously museum quality and actively used. "You live here alone?" Mira asked, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "I have staff," Wolfram said, "though they are not here at present. I sent them away when I felt you approaching." "Felt me?" "I am very aware of my boundaries, Mira Keller. I know when they are crossed." He moved through the entrance hall with fluid grace, gesturing for her to follow. "Come, you must be thirsty after your walk." He led her to a sitting room where a fire burned in an enormous stone fireplace despite the mild temperature outside. The furniture was upholstered in deep burgundy and midnight blue, arranged around low tables of polished wood. Wolfram gestured to a chair and then moved to a side cabinet where crystal decanters caught the firelight. "Wine?" he offered. "Or water, if you prefer. I keep both, though I have little use for either." Mira sat, her surveyor's mind automatically cataloging details. Crown molding from the 18th century, original hardwood floors, windows with hand-blown glass that distorted the darkening sky beyond. "Water, please." Wolfram poured from a crystal pitcher, handed her a glass, and settled into the chair opposite hers with the kind of absolute stillness that most people could not maintain. He did not fidget, did not shift his weight, did not display any of the small, unconscious movements that marked living beings. He simply was, present and watchful, and utterly composed. "So," Mira said, because the silence was beginning to unnerve her, "are you going to tell me how you've actually managed to live here since 1789? Or should I assume you're committing identity fraud and inherited your ancestors' tendency toward dramatic statements?" The corner of Wolfram's mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "You do not believe in anything that cannot be measured and mapped." "I believe in evidence," Mira said. "And the evidence suggests you're either delusional, lying, or operating some kind of elaborate heritage tourism scam." "Look at me, Mira Keller," Wolfram said quietly. "Look carefully, with the same professional attention you would give to one of your maps. Tell me what you see." She looked. She had been trained to observe, to notice discrepancies, to catalog details that others missed. And as she studied Wolfram in the firelight, she began to see things that her mind had been skipping over, refusing to process. The complete absence of breath, his chest never rising or falling, the way his skin did not flush or pale but remained uniformly alabaster. The utter immobility when he chose to be still, beyond even the discipline of trained performers. The fact that he cast a shadow, but the shadow seemed somehow thinner than it should be, as if he were not quite as solid as the furniture around him. "What are you?" she asked, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I am what your species has always known," Wolfram said. "What you have written about in stories, painted in warnings, whispered about in the dark. I am vampire. I am king, and I have walked this earth for 743 years. Mira's rational mind rejected it instantly. Vampires were folklore, mythology, cautionary tales. But she had built her career on finding things that supposedly did not exist, on proving that absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. And Wolfram sat before her, impossible and real, meeting her gaze with eyes that held centuries of accumulated patience. "Prove it," she said. Wolfram rose in a motion too fast to track, and suddenly he was across the room, then back in his chair, a leather-bound book now resting in his pale hands. He opened it to a random page and held it out to her. The book was a journal, written in flowing script, dated 1653. The entries described the construction of a bridge in what was now the neighboring county, included sketches of the engineering, notes on the workers hired. The handwriting was identical to the signature she had seen on the 1790 cadastral map. "I have 500 similar volumes," Wolfram said. "I have documented my existence meticulously, because I knew that memory alone would not be enough across the centuries. I watched this country form from colonial ambition. I saw the revolution, the Civil War, the industrial transformation, the digital age. I have lived through every era of your maps, from hand-drawn parchment to satellite imaging." He closed the journal. "I am vampire, Mira. That is the truth you came here to find." She should run. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at her to leave immediately. But Mira had never been ruled by fear, and underneath the shock she felt the fierce pull of curiosity that had defined her entire life. "Why did you erase yourself from the maps?" Something shuddered behind Wolfram's eyes, a flash of pain so intense that Mira flinched in sympathy. "That," he said quietly, "is a longer story, and one I have not told anyone in 200 years. I walked 3 miles in the dark to find a place that supposedly doesn't exist," Mira said. "I think I've earned a story." Wolfram looked at her for a long moment, and Mira had the sense that he was making some kind of decision, weighing variables she could not see. Then he rose and moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. "I was not always alone," he said finally. "There was a time when I welcomed visitors, when this estate was known throughout the region, when I held gatherings and played the role of eccentric nobleman well enough that questions about my unchanging appearance were dismissed as good breeding and excellent health." He paused. "In 1803, a woman came to catalog my library. Her name was Eleanor. She was brilliant, curious, fearless. She saw what I was within a week and was not afraid. She stayed. We fell in love." Mira listened, hearing the weight of old grief in every word. "I was careless," Wolfram continued, his voice dropping. "I allowed her to come and go freely, to maintain her life in town, to visit her family. I thought I could have both worlds, my nature and her humanity, my isolation and her warmth. I was arrogant enough to believe I could protect her from anything." His hands clenched against the mantel. There were hunters in those days, as there are now, though less organized. They tracked her movements. They followed her here. They found my estate because I had made it findable, because I had not hidden the roads or erased the maps. They came for me, and she stood between us. Oh, Mira breathed, understanding flooding through her. They killed her to wound me, Wolfram said flatly. And it worked. I destroyed them, everyone. But it was too late for Eleanor. She died in this house in my arms, and the last thing she said was that she was sorry for leading them to me. He turned from the fire, his face a mask of composed anguish. I decided that day that I would never again make someone I loved findable. I spent 30 years erasing every reference to this place, every road, every map, every document. I made myself a myth, a rumor, a ghost story. No woman could find my estate because I made it impossible to find. If no one could reach me, no one I cared for could be used against me. No one could die because of my carelessness. That's why the locals say no woman has ever found this place and returned, Mira said softly. It's not a threat. It's just the truth. You've kept everyone away for 2 centuries. Yes, Wolfram said. Until you. They looked at each other across the firelit room, and Mira felt something shift between them, some recognition passing in the space where words failed. She had come seeking a cartographic mystery and found instead a man who had made himself unmappable out of love and grief. A vampire king who had chosen loneliness over the risk of loss. I'm sorry, Mira said, and meant it. I'm sorry that happened to you, to her. I'm sorry I disrupted your isolation. Are you? Wolfram asked, moving closer. You do not seem sorry. You seem determined. You came here against all advice and reason, walked through darkness to reach my gates, and you are still sitting in my home asking questions even after learning what I am. That is not the behavior of someone who regrets their choices. I don't regret finding truth, Mira said. Even when the truth is complicated. Complicated, Wolfram repeated, and this time there was definitely amusement in his voice. You have just learned that vampires exist, that you are sitting alone with one who could kill you before you could draw breath to scream, and you call it complicated. Can you? Mira asked, meeting his storm-gray eyes. Kill me before I could scream? Yes. Are you going to? No, Wolfram said, and sat down again, closer this time, in the chair directly beside hers. I spent 2 centuries ensuring no one could find me, Mira Keller, and you found me anyway through old maps and professional stubbornness and sheer bloody-minded determination. That is not something I can simply kill and forget. I'm glad to hear it, Mira said dryly. So what happens now? Now, Wolfram said, I face a choice I have not had to make in 200 years. Do I allow you to leave, to add my estate back to your modern maps, to make me findable again to all the world, or do I convince you to keep my secret, to leave the old map lost, to let me remain erased? Mira thought about it, turning the variables over in her mind the way she would approach a complex survey. I think, she said slowly, there's a third option. Which is? I keep your secret. I don't add the estate to any public database, but you let me come back. You let me map this place for myself, document it, understand it. Private record, never filed, never shared, just for the sake of knowing the truth. Wolfram went very still. Why would you want that? Because I'm a cartographer, Mira said. And this is the most extraordinary place I've ever found. Because you've been alone for 200 years, and that seems like a very long time, even for someone who lives for centuries. Because maybe isolation was the right choice after what happened to Eleanor. But maybe it's been long enough. She took a breath. Because I'd like to know you better, Wolfram Alaric, if you'll let me. The vulnerability that crossed his face was so raw, so unexpected, that Mira nearly reached out to him before catching herself. This was a vampire king, ancient and powerful, who had just admitted to killing a group of hunters with his bare hands. But he looked at her in that moment like a man who had been starving and been offered unexpected sustenance. You do not fear me, he said, and it was not quite a question. I probably should, Mira admitted. But no, I don't. You've had 200 years to hurt people and you've chosen isolation instead. You could have killed me the moment I arrived and you offered me water. I don't think you're dangerous to me, Wolfram. I think you're lonely. Loneliness is safer than loss, Wolfram said quietly. Maybe, Mira agreed, but it's still loneliness. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Wolfram rose and extended a hand. Come. If you are going to map my estate, you should see it properly. Mira took his hand without hesitation. His skin was cool, not cold, but noticeably lower than human temperature, and his grip was gentle despite the strength she could sense coiled beneath his composure. He led her through the mansion, and as they walked, he told her the history of each room. The library where Eleanor had worked, still containing thousands of volumes spanning 7 centuries, organized by a system only Wolfram understood. The portrait gallery where paintings showed him in different eras, different fashions, always with the same white hair and ageless face, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by people who must have been long dead. The music room with instruments from a dozen different periods, a harpsichord beside a grand piano beside a modern electric guitar that looked incongruously contemporary. I adapt, Wolfram said, noticing her surprise at the guitar. I have to. The world changes and I remain. So I learn the new languages, the new technologies, the new art forms. Otherwise, I would be a fossil, preserved but irrelevant. Do you play? Mira asked, gesturing at the guitar. I taught myself using internet videos, Wolfram said, and there was something almost shy in the admission. It seemed important to understand the music that humans find meaningful now. Mira felt something warm unfold in her chest, a tenderness toward this ancient, powerful being who had spent his isolation learning guitar from YouTube tutorials. Will you play something for me? Wolfram hesitated, then picked up the guitar with the ease of long practice. He settled into a chair, adjusted the tuning with perfect pitch, and began to play. The song was contemporary, something Mira half recognized from the radio, rendered heartbreakingly beautiful in his skilled hands. He did not sing, but the melody alone conveyed longing and sadness and a fragile, uncertain hope. When he finished, Mira realized she was crying. I'm sorry, Wolfram said immediately, setting the guitar aside. I did not mean to cause you distress. You didn't, Mira said, wiping her eyes. It was beautiful. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. A monster maybe, something inhuman. But you're so very human, Wolfram. Lonely and grieving and trying to find meaning across centuries. Learning guitar because you want to understand the world, even though you've removed yourself from it. She stood, moved closer to him. You didn't have to show me any of this. You could have frightened me away or erased my memory or any number of things. Why are you letting me see who you really are? Wolfram looked up at her, and in the candlelight his eyes were storm cloud silver. Because you found me, Mira Keller. In 200 years, no one has managed what you did. You walked through darkness and warnings and erased roads to reach my gates. That means something. I am not certain what, but it means something. Maybe it means you're ready to be found, Mira said softly. Perhaps, Wolfram said. He rose, standing close enough that she could feel the absence of heat from his body, a cool stillness that should have been frightening, but somehow was not. It is late. You should rest. I have guest quarters that have not been used in 2 centuries, but they are maintained. You are welcome to stay. I should probably get back, Mira said, though the thought of walking 3 miles in full darkness was deeply unappealing. I have work tomorrow. It is nearly midnight, Wolfram said. There are no taxis running, no way to contact anyone with your phone dead, and the walk would be dangerous in full dark. Please, stay. I promise you will be completely safe. Mira considered. Every rational instinct said she should leave, should not spend the night in the isolated mansion of a vampire she had just met, no matter how lonely and artistic he seemed. But she had stopped trusting only rational instincts the moment she decided to walk an erased road into the unmapped forest. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Wolfram led her up the sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, down a corridor lined with more paintings and tapestries, to a bedroom that looked like something from a historical drama. a four-poster bed with heavy curtains, antique furniture, a fireplace that Wolfram lit with a match, filling the room with warm, dancing light. "There are clothes in the wardrobe that might fit you," Wolfram said. They were Eleanor's. I could never bring myself to dispose of them. He paused at the doorway. "Sleep as long as you need. The house is safe, every door and window warded against intrusion. Nothing will harm you here." "Wolfram," Mira said, and he turned back. "Thank you for trusting me, for showing me all of this." "Thank you," Wolfram said quietly, "for finding me." Then he was gone, the door closing silently behind him. Mira explored the room, finding Eleanor's clothes carefully preserved in the wardrobe, long dresses in styles from the early 19th century, impossibly delicate and clearly cherished. She chose a nightgown instead, soft white linen that fit reasonably well, and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets smelled of lavender and thyme, and despite everything, the vampires, the impossible mansion, the ancient grief, Mira felt safe. She fell asleep thinking about Wolfram's hands on the guitar, the centuries of loneliness written in every note. She woke to morning light streaming through tall windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then it all came flooding back. She rose, found her own clothes cleaned and pressed and laid out on a chair, dressed quickly, and followed the scent of coffee downstairs. Wolfram was in the kitchen, an enormous room that combined 18th century architecture with surprisingly modern appliances. He stood at the counter, fully dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt, his white hair pulled back from his face, preparing breakfast with the competence of someone who had learned to cook across centuries. "You don't eat," Mira said from the doorway. "I do not require food," Wolfram corrected, not turning around. "But I can eat, and I remember how. And I thought you would appreciate breakfast after your unexpected stay." He turned, holding a plate of eggs and toast and fruit arranged with artistic precision. "Coffee is ready as well. I hope I remembered the proportions correctly. It has been some time since I prepared it for anyone." Mira took the plate, touched by the gesture. "This is incredibly kind." "You are my guest," Wolfram said simply. "Hospitality is a matter of honor, even for vampires, especially for vampire kings." They sat at a small table by the windows, morning sun flooding in, and Mira noticed that Wolfram positioned himself carefully in the shadow, avoiding the direct light. "The sun," she said. "It hurts you?" "It weakens me," Wolfram said. "I will not burn or die, not from mere sunlight, but it drains my strength and causes significant pain. I can endure it for short periods if necessary, but I prefer to avoid it." He gestured at the shadows. "Thus, my careful positioning." Mira ate her breakfast, and they talked. Wolfram asked about her work, her life, her decision to become a cartographer, and she found herself telling him about her childhood fascination with maps, her need to document and understand the world, the satisfaction of finding lost places and making them known again. In turn, she asked him about the centuries he had lived, and he told her stories that seemed impossible, meeting founding fathers, watching cities grow from nothing, surviving wars and plagues and revolutions. "Do you ever regret it?" Mira asked. "Living so long, watching everyone around you age and die?" "Every day," Wolfram said quietly. "But I do not have the option of dying, Mira. I am vampire. We are functionally immortal unless killed by very specific means. So I adapt, I endure, I find what meaning I can in the endless years." He looked at her. "Lately I have found less and less. Until last night." "Last night?" "You reminded me what it felt like," Wolfram said, "to have someone see me. Not the monster, not the myth, but the person beneath. I have been invisible for 200 years, and in one evening you made me visible again." Mira's heart was beating too fast. She set down her coffee cup carefully. "I should probably go soon. My job, my apartment, my life, they're all waiting. But I meant what I said last night. I want to come back. I want to map this place, understand it, document it, if you'll let me." "I will let you," Wolfram said. "But Mira..." You should understand what you are agreeing to. This estate is not just a mystery to be solved. I am not just an interesting subject for study. If you come back, if you keep coming back, you will become entangled in my world, with my nature, with the dangers that come from being associated with vampires, even in isolation. I understand, Mira said, though she was not certain she fully did. Do you? Wolfram rose, moved closer, and this time when he looked at her, his eyes held something intense and searching. I have not allowed myself to care for anyone in 200 years, Mira Keller. But I find myself caring whether you leave and never return. I find myself wanting you to come back, wanting to know you better, wanting to be known by you. That is dangerous for both of us. Why dangerous for me? Because I am vampire, Wolfram said. Because there are others of my kind who would see any human connection as weakness to exploit. Because there are still hunters in the world who would use you against me if they knew you existed. Because I unmade myself to prevent exactly this situation becoming vulnerable through caring. He reached out, his cool fingers brushing her cheek with infinite gentleness. And yet, I cannot seem to make myself send you away. Mira leaned into his touch, her decision crystallizing. Then don't. Let me come back. Let me be part of your life, whatever that means. I'll be careful. I won't tell anyone about this place. But don't shut me out because you're afraid of what might happen. You are asking me to choose hope over safety, Wolfram said. Yes, Mira said simply. For a long moment, Wolfram stood frozen, and Mira could see the struggle playing out behind his eyes, 2 centuries of protective isolation warring with the desperate desire for connection. Then, very slowly, he nodded. Come back, he said, as often as you wish. Map my estate, ask your questions, be here. I will not shut you out. Mira smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. I'll come back this weekend. I need to get my proper surveying equipment anyway. Wolfram called her a car. Apparently he had arrangements with a local service that asked no questions and walked her to the gates as they waited for it to arrive. In daylight, the estate looked even more impossible, a perfect Gothic mansion emerging from manicured grounds, completely invisible to the modern world. The road will be easier to find now, Wolfram said. I will stop maintaining the obscurement during the day. You should be able to drive directly here next time. You're making yourself findable again, Mira said, understanding. For me. For you, Wolfram agreed. A small step. The road only, nothing more. But a step nonetheless. The car arrived, and Mira climbed in, looking back at Wolfram standing at his gates, white-haired and pale and impossibly beautiful in the morning light filtering through the trees. He raised one hand in farewell, and she waved back, already planning her return. The week that followed felt surreal. Mira went to work, completed her assigned surveys, attended meetings, and moved through her normal life while carrying the knowledge of Wolfram's existence like a secret flame. She told no one, filed no reports, added nothing to any database. The 1790 cadastral map she scanned and saved to her personal drive, then deleted from the county system, reporting it too damaged to restore. At night, she researched vampires' folklore, mythology, historical accounts, trying to separate fact from fiction. Most of it was clearly wrong, but some details matched what Wolfram had shown her. The aversion to sunlight, the immortality, the strength and speed, the need for blood that he had not mentioned, but that seemed universal across sources. She wondered what he fed on, how he survived in isolation, but decided those were questions for when she knew him better. Saturday morning, she loaded her car with surveying equipment and drove out to where the old road should intersect the highway. This time, it was there, not obvious, not marked, but visible if you knew to look. A narrow track leading into the forest, solid and real beneath her tires as she drove. The gates were open when she arrived, and Wolfram stood waiting, dressed in dark colors that made his pale skin and white hair seem to glow. He smiled when he saw her, a real smile that transformed his usually solemn face into something radiant. You came back, he said, and there was relief in his voice. I said I would, Mira replied, getting out of the car. I brought equipment. I want to start with the property boundaries, then work inward to map the grounds and buildings. It'll take weeks, maybe months to do it properly." "I have time," Wolfram said. "I have nothing but time." They worked together through the day, Mira measuring and recording while Wolfram helped carry equipment and answered questions about the estate's history. He showed her where the original boundaries had been marked in 1789, stones carved with symbols that predated American surveying standards. He explained the architecture of the mansion, the hidden rooms and passages built to provide escape routes and protection. He walked her through the gardens, pointing out plants that had been cultivated for centuries, some of which should not have been able to survive in this climate. "I maintain them through my own means," Wolfram explained when Mira asked. "Vampires have certain abilities beyond strength and speed. I can influence living things to some degree, encourage growth, prevent decay. It is not magic precisely, but something inherent to what we are." "What else can you do?" Mira asked, fascinated. "I can compel minds," Wolfram said carefully. "Make humans forget, believe things that are not true, obey commands. It is one of the reasons my kind are dangerous, and it is something I have not used in 200 years, by choice." "Why not?" "Because it is a violation," Wolfram said flatly. "To take someone's will, to rewrite their thoughts, it is no different than assault in my view. I saw too many of my kind use compulsion carelessly, treat humans as toys to manipulate. I decided long ago that I would not become that." He looked at her. "I will never use it on you, Mira. You have my word as king and as myself. Your mind is your own." "Thank you," Mira said, and meant it. The fact that he could control her but chose not to made his restraint mean something. They broke for lunch, Mira eating sandwiches she had brought, Wolfram sitting with her in companionable silence. She asked him about being a king, and he explained that vampire society was organized into courts and territories, ruled by the oldest and strongest of their kind. He was king of the northeastern territories, though he had largely abdicated active rule when he went into isolation. "There is a council that manages the day-to-day governance," Wolfram said. "I attend meetings once per decade, make the necessary rulings, and then retreat here again. They think me half mad from isolation, but they respect my age and power enough to maintain the arrangement." "How old are you exactly?" Mira asked. "I was born in 1283, Wolfram said. "Made vampire in 1307, during the dissolution of the Knights Templar. I was a knight myself, wounded in battle, dying. A vampire offered me a choice: death or transformation. I chose transformation, and I have never been certain if it was wisdom or cowardice." Mira did the math. "You're 743 years old." "Yes," Wolfram said, "though I stopped counting somewhere around 500. The years blur together after a certain point." "What was it like?" Mira asked. "The 14th century?" Wolfram's expression grew distant. "Brutal, beautiful, terrifying. I watched the plague sweep through Europe, killing a third of the continent. I saw kingdoms rise and fall, wars fought over ideology and territory and pride. I learned that humans are capable of extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary kindness, often simultaneously." He looked at her. "But you do not want a history lesson." "I do," Mira said. "I want to know everything. What you've seen, what you've learned, who you were before, and who you became. I want to understand you." Something vulnerable crossed Wolfram's face. "Why?" "Because you're extraordinary," Mira said simply. "Because I've spent my life mapping places, and you're the most fascinating geography I've ever encountered. Because when I'm here, I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters." "Mira," Wolfram said, and his voice was rough with emotion he could not quite hide. "You should not say such things to me." "Why not?" "Because I am trying very hard not to fall in love with you," Wolfram said quietly. "And you are making it impossible." The words hung between them, fragile and enormous. Mira's heart was racing, her breath coming fast, and she realized she was standing on the edge of something irrevocable. She could step back, keep this professional, maintain the distance that would keep them both safe, or She could step forward into the unknown. "I'm not trying to make it impossible," Mira said. "I'm not trying to do anything except be here with you. But if I'm being honest, I'm falling too. I have been since you played guitar for me. Maybe since you opened the gates. I don't know. But I'm falling, Wolfram, and I'm not sorry about it." Wolfram closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked like a man in pain. "You do not understand what you are saying. I am vampire. I will live for centuries more while you age and die. I cannot give you a normal life, a human future, anything that resembles the safety you deserve. And I cannot turn you, I will not transform you into this, no matter what you might ask, no matter how much I might want to keep you forever. I made that vow after Eleanor died, that I would never make another vampire, never spread this curse." "I'm not asking you to turn me," Mira said. "I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking for now, for whatever time we have. Isn't that enough?" "It will hurt," Wolfram said, opening his eyes. "When you age and I do not, when you die and I remain. It will destroy me, Mira. I barely survived losing Eleanor, and I had only loved her for 3 years. If I love you for 20, 30, 40 years and then lose you, I do not think I would recover." "Then we make the time count," Mira said. "We love each other as much as we can for as long as we can, and we don't waste it worrying about the end." She moved closer, reached out, took his cool hand in hers. "I would rather have 30 years with you than a lifetime of safety without you, and I think you feel the same, or you would have sent me away already." "I am selfish enough that I do feel the same," Wolfram admitted. "I have been alone for so long, Mira, and you are sunlight and warmth and life, and I want to keep you more than I have wanted anything in 2 centuries. "Then keep me," Mira said. Wolfram pulled her close, and she went willingly, pressing against the cool solidity of his body. He held her with infinite care, as if she were something precious and breakable, and when he bent his head to kiss her, his lips were gentle and reverent. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully, Wolfram maintaining perfect control even as Mira felt passion rising between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least Mira was, while Wolfram maintained the stillness that was his nature, she rested her forehead against his chest. "I love you," she said. "I know it's fast. I know it's irrational, but I love you, Wolfram Alaric." "I love you," Wolfram said, his voice rough. "I have loved you since you demanded proof that I was vampire, since you refused to be frightened, since you saw me instead of the monster. I love you, Mira Keller, and I will love you for whatever time we have." They stood there in the garden, holding each other, and Mira felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was what she had been looking for all her life, not just a mystery to solve, but a person to know, to love, to build something with, even if that something was temporary and fragile and doomed by the nature of what they were. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Mira would drive to the estate every weekend, sometimes staying 1 day, sometimes 2. She continued her surveying work, mapping the grounds with meticulous precision. But that became secondary to simply being with Wolfram. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He taught her about vampire society, the courts and councils and ancient laws that governed his kind. She taught him about modern cartography, digital mapping, the way humans understood and documented the world now. He played music for her, the guitar, the piano, the harpsichord, and she sang along when she knew the songs, her voice untrained but enthusiastic. They cooked together, Wolfram relearning the pleasure of food he did not need but could still enjoy. They walked the grounds at dusk, his arm around her shoulders, talking about books and history and the small moments that made up a life. And slowly, carefully, Wolfram began to trust that this might last. He showed her the room where Eleanor had died, a small bedroom in the east wing that he had kept locked for 200 years. The furniture was covered in dust, the air stale, but the bloodstain on the floor remained dark and accusatory. "I could never clean it," Wolfram said quietly. It felt like erasing her, like saying her death did not matter. Mira knelt beside the stain, placing her hand over it. "She mattered. What happened to her was terrible and wrong, and you deserved better. But keeping this room locked, keeping yourself locked away from the world that's not honoring her, Wolfram, that's just hurting yourself. I do not know how to do otherwise." Wolfram admitted. "Let me help you clean this room," Mira said. "Let's honor her by making it beautiful again, by releasing the grief. She wouldn't have wanted you to suffer for 200 years. Together they cleaned. They removed the dust covers, washed the windows, scrubbed the floors until the blood stain finally faded. They brought in fresh linens, flowers from the garden, new curtains that let in light. It took an entire weekend, but by the end, the room was transformed no longer a shrine to tragedy, but a peaceful space that acknowledged loss without being consumed by it. "Thank you," Wolfram said, standing in the doorway and looking at the restored room. "I could not have done this alone." "You don't have to do anything alone anymore," Mira said, taking his hand. Months passed. Mira's survey of the estate was nearly complete. She had documented every building, every garden path, every boundary stone. The maps she created were beautiful, professional, precise, and completely private. She stored them on an encrypted drive and told no one about their existence. At work, she claimed she was dating someone who lived out of town, which was true enough that her colleagues accepted it without question. She did not mention that her boyfriend was a 700-year-old vampire king who could not appear in photographs and avoided sunlight. Wolfram, for his part, began to re-enter the world in small ways. He attended a vampire council meeting for the first time in a decade, and though he said little, his presence was noted. He hired staff again, humans who knew what he was, and were compensated extremely well for their discretion, so that the estate was maintained even when Mira was not there. He opened one of his bank accounts, money invested centuries ago, and compounded into a fortune he had not touched in years, and made quiet donations to causes that mattered. "You are bringing me back to life," he told Mira one evening as they sat together in his library. "I did not realize how much of myself I had shut down until you made me feel again." "I'm glad," Mira said, curled against his side. "You deserve to live, not just exist." "I want to give you something," Wolfram said. He stood, crossed to a cabinet, and retrieved a small wooden box. Inside was a key, ornate and old, clearly crafted by hand. "This is the master key to the estate. It will open every door, every gate, every lock. I want you to have it. I want you to be able to come and go freely, to consider this your home as much as mine." Mira took the key, feeling the weight of the gesture. "Are you sure?" "I made myself unfindable for 200 years, Wolfram said. "And you found me anyway. Now I want to be found. By you. Always by you." Mira kissed him, pouring everything she felt into the contact, love and gratitude, and the fierce joy of being chosen by someone extraordinary. When they broke apart, Wolfram was looking at her with an expression she had learned to recognize, a particular intensity that meant he was wrestling with something difficult. "What is it?" she asked. "I need to tell you something," Wolfram said, "about how I survive, about blood." Mira waited, giving him space to find the words. "I require blood to live," Wolfram said carefully. "Not much by vampire standards, a pint every week or so, but I require it nonetheless. I have arrangements with blood banks, donations purchased quietly and consumed privately. I have not fed directly from a human in 2 centuries, not since Eleanor." "Did you feed from her?" Mira asked, curious rather than frightened. "Yes," Wolfram said, "with her consent and carefully. It was intimate, pleasurable for both of us, a sharing of life, but it also created a bond that made her easier to track, left a trace of me in her blood that the hunters could follow. I believe that is how they found her, so I vowed never to feed from a human again." "Do you want to?" Mira asked quietly. "Feed from me?" Wolfram's eyes darkened, his pupils dilating in a way that was distinctly inhuman. "Yes," he said roughly. "More than you can imagine. But I will not. I will not risk you that way." "What if I want to risk myself?" Mira asked. "What if I want that intimacy with you, that bond?" "Mira." "I've been doing research," Mira interrupted. On vampires, blood bonding, all of it, and I know the risks. I know it could make me easier to track, easier to find. But Wolfram, I'm already here. I'm already choosing this. And if feeding from me would bring you pleasure, would make our connection deeper, then I want to give you that." Wolfram stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You do not understand what you are offering." "Then explain it to me," Mira said. He turned to face her, and in the candlelight his eyes were molten silver. "If I feed from you, I will taste your life, your emotions, your very essence. I will become attuned to you in ways that go beyond normal human connection. I will be able to sense when you are hurt, frightened, in danger. I will know if you lie to me, if you hide things from me. And you will feel me as well, my presence, my emotions, the weight of my age and power. It is invasive and intimate and irrevocable, Mira. Once created, a blood bond cannot be broken except by death." "That sounds," Mira said slowly, "like exactly what I want. To be that close to you. To know you that completely." "It would make you vulnerable," Wolfram said desperately. "Anyone who knew we were bonded could use you against me, could hurt you to wound me." "Then we don't tell anyone," Mira said. "We keep it private, like everything else. But Wolfram, I'm already vulnerable because I love you. A blood bond doesn't change that. It just makes it official." Wolfram crossed the room in a blur of speed, pulling her to her feet, his hands framing her face. "You are certain you truly want this?" "I'm certain," Mira said. "I want all of you, including this." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and when he pulled back, his eyes had shifted to something more predatory, the vampire nature rising to the surface. "Not here," he said roughly. "Upstairs, in my room. If we are going to do this, we do it properly." He led her through the mansion to his private quarters, a suite of rooms she had not yet seen. The bedroom was elegant and spare, dominated by an enormous bed with dark sheets. Wolfram lit candles, filling the space with warm, flickering light, and then turned to her. "You can still change your mind," he said. "I won't," Mira said. He guided her to the bed, arranging her against the pillows, and knelt beside her. "I will be as gentle as possible," he promised. "It will hurt for a moment when I bite, but then it should become pleasurable. Tell me if you want me to stop." Mira nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and nerves. Wolfram bent over her, pressing a kiss to her throat, and she felt his lips part, the sharp points of fangs pressing against her skin. Then a brief, bright pain as he bit down, and she gasped, but the pain faded almost instantly, replaced by a warmth that spread through her entire body, a sensation of intimacy so intense it bordered on overwhelming. She could feel Wolfram in her mind, his presence vast and ancient and infinitely careful, surrounding her with something that felt like protective wings. And beneath that, she felt his emotions, the love he had for her, fierce and desperate and absolute, and the pleasure he took from her blood, her life, her willing offering. She reached up, threading her fingers through his white hair, holding him to her throat, and felt his arms tighten around her in response. The world narrowed to this moment, this connection, this bond being forged between them. When Wolfram finally pulled back, his lips stained red, his eyes glowing with power, Mira felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. He licked the wound closed with careful precision, and she watched as it healed under his attention, leaving only 2 small marks. "Are you all right?" Wolfram asked, his voice rough. "I'm perfect," Mira said, and meant it. She felt energized, connected, complete in a way she had never experienced. That was incredible. "You are incredible," Wolfram said. He lay down beside her, pulling her into his arms. "I can feel you now. Your heartbeat, your emotions, your life. You are part of me, Mira, and I am part of you." "Good," Mira said, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "That's exactly what I wanted." They lay together for a long time, Wolfram occasionally asking how she felt, monitoring her carefully for any negative effects. But Mira felt nothing but contentment and a bone-deep certainty that she had made the right choice. The bond changed things between them in subtle ways. Wolfram could now sense when Mira was arriving at the estate before she reached the gates, could feel her moods even when she was hours away. Mira found that she dreamed of him when they were apart, vivid dreams that felt almost like communication. She learned to recognize the presence of him in the back of her mind, a constant awareness that she was not alone. It made her feel safe in a way she had not anticipated. Winter arrived, and Mira spent Christmas at the estate. She brought decorations, a small tree, lights, ornaments, and convinced Wolfram to help her decorate despite his protests that he had not celebrated human holidays in centuries. "Consider it an experiment in rejoining the world," Mira said, hanging tinsel. They made it beautiful together, transforming the library into something festive and warm. Mira cooked Christmas dinner, and Wolfram sat with her while she ate, telling her stories about winters past, about Christmases celebrated across 7 centuries. "This is the best one," he said finally, watching her by firelight. "Because you are here." Mira gave him a gift, a pocket watch she had found in an antique store, beautifully made with an inscription inside the cover. "To Wolfram, who makes time meaningful. Love, Mira." He looked at it for a long moment, his thumb tracing the inscription, and when he looked up, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I will treasure this." He gave her a gift as well, a necklace that had belonged to his mother, 700 years old, wrought gold set with sapphires. "I have carried this through the centuries," Wolfram said, fastening it around her throat. "And I can think of no one more worthy to wear it than you." Mira touched the necklace, feeling the weight of history and trust. "I'll keep it safe." "You already keep my heart safe," Wolfram said. "The necklace is merely a symbol." They made love that night, slow and careful and filled with the kind of tenderness that came from deep knowing. And afterward, lying in Wolfram's arms in the candlelit quiet, Mira thought she had never been happier. But happiness, she was learning, was fragile. It was March when things changed. Mira had been preparing to drive to the estate as usual when her phone rang a number she did not recognize. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Mira Keller?" The voice was male, unfamiliar, with a faint accent. "Yes? My name is Gregor Thorne. I am a member of the Vampire Council that oversees this territory. I am calling to request a meeting regarding Wolfram Alaric." Mira's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please do not insult us both with lies," Gregor said smoothly. "We are aware that you have been visiting the Alaric estate regularly for months. We are aware that you are blood bonded to our king. We simply wish to speak with you about the situation." "How did you find me?" Mira demanded. "We have been monitoring Wolfram for some time," Gregor said. "When he suddenly began displaying behavior inconsistent with 2 centuries of isolation, attending meetings, hiring staff, showing emotion, we investigated. You were not difficult to identify." He paused. "We mean you no harm, Miss Keller. We simply wish to understand his intentions. Will you meet with us?" Every instinct told her to refuse, to hang up, to run to Wolfram immediately. But Mira had not survived 5 years of difficult fieldwork by panicking. When and where? They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in town, neutral territory, the following afternoon. Mira drove to the estate immediately to tell Wolfram. He went very still when she explained, his face settling into the kind of inhuman composure that meant he was either furious or frightened or both. "They should not have contacted you," he said quietly. "They should have come to me." "Why didn't they?" "Because they wanted to gauge your importance without my interference," Wolfram said. "And because they are testing boundaries, seeing how much they can push before I respond." He reached out, pulling her into his arms. "I do not want you to meet with them, Mira. The council can be dangerous, and I cannot protect you if I am not there." "Then come with me," Mira said. "They did not invite me," Wolfram said. "They invited you specifically. If I appear, it will be seen as a sign of weakness, an admission that you have power over me." "Don't you think they already know that?" Mira asked gently. Wolfram sighed. "Yes, they know. But there is knowing and there is confirming, and I am trying to avoid the latter." "What do they want?" Mira asked. "Assurance that I am still fit to rule," Wolfram said. "Or possibly a reason to remove me from power. The council has tolerated my isolation because I am old and strong enough that challenging me would be costly. But if they perceive that I have become weak, Vulnerable through human attachment, they might see an opportunity. "I won't let them hurt you," Mira said fiercely. "You cannot stop them," Wolfram said, but he held her tighter. "But I appreciate the sentiment." They talked through the night, strategizing. Wolfram explained the politics of vampire courts, the various factions on the council, who might be ally or enemy. He told her what to say, what to avoid, how to present herself as competent and unremarkable, someone who posed no threat to vampire society. "But you do pose a threat," Wolfram said quietly as dawn approached, "because you make me care about the world again, and a king who cares is more dangerous than one who has withdrawn into isolation." "Is that a bad thing?" Mira asked. "For them, yes," Wolfram said. "For me, no. But we will see what the council decides." Mira met Gregor Thorne at the coffee shop as arranged. He was immediately recognizable, pale skin, white hair, the kind of ageless beauty that marked older vampires. He wore a modern suit and smiled when she approached, all polished charm. "Miss Keller," he said, standing. "Thank you for meeting with me." "I'm not sure I had much choice," Mira said, sitting across from him. "You always have choices," Gregor said, "though I appreciate your cooperation." He ordered coffee for her despite her not asking, and when it arrived, he watched her with the kind of focused attention that made her deeply uncomfortable. "What do you want?" Mira asked bluntly. "Direct. I like that." Gregor leaned back in his chair. "I want to understand your relationship with our king. Wolfram has been isolated for 200 years, functionally absent from vampire society. Now he is suddenly engaged, attending meetings, making decisions. The council would like to know why." "Maybe he was ready to rejoin the world," Mira said. "Or maybe he was manipulated into it," Gregor countered. "You must understand, Miss Keller, that vampires and humans have complicated history. There are those on the council who believe humans should not be allowed near positions of power, that they represent weakness and liability. Wolfram's attachment to you could be seen as proof of that position." "I'm not trying to manipulate anyone," Mira said. "I'm a cartographer. I found the estate by accident and we became friends, that's all." "Friends," Gregor repeated, and his smile was sharp. "Is that what you call a blood bond now?" Mira forced herself to stay calm. "What Wolfram and I share is private." "Nothing is private when it involves a king," Gregor said. "His choices affect all vampires under his rule, and you, Miss Keller, are a mortal woman who will age and die while he remains unchanged. That is a problem." "Why?" "Because it will break him," Gregor said flatly. "He barely survived losing his last human love. Losing you will destroy him completely, and a destroyed king is useless to his people." He leaned forward. "So, the council has a proposal. We will offer you transformation. You become vampire, bonded to Wolfram for eternity, and the problem of mortality is solved. You would need to leave your human life behind, of course, but you would have immortality and a king who loves you. It is a generous offer." Mira's mind raced. Wolfram had said he would never turn her, that he considered vampirism a curse. But the council was offering it as a solution, a way to legitimize their relationship in vampire society. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Gregor's expression hardened. "Then the council will take steps to protect their king from himself. You would be removed from his life, by compulsion or by force if necessary. We cannot allow you to destroy him." "You can't force me to become a vampire," Mira said. "No," Gregor agreed. "But we can make your mortal life very difficult. We can erase you from society even more thoroughly than Wolfram erased his estate. You would lose your job, your home, your identity. You would disappear, Miss Keller, and Wolfram would eventually forget you. We have done it before." Mira felt sick. "I need to talk to Wolfram." "Of course," Gregor said, standing. "You have 1 week to decide. Transformation or separation. There is no third option." He left, and Mira sat alone with her untouched coffee, trying to process. The council was giving her an impossible choice: become something she was not sure she wanted to be, or lose the person she loved. She drove to the estate immediately. Wolfram was waiting at the gates, having felt her distress through the bond, and he pulled her into his arms the moment she stepped out of the car. "What did they say?" he demanded. Mira told him everything. Wolfram listened in silence, his expression growing darker with every word. When she finished, he was shaking with fury. "They have no right," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "No right to threaten you, to offer transformation without my consent, to interfere in our lives." "What do we do?" Mira asked. Wolfram pulled back, looking at her intently. "What do you want to do? This is your choice, Mira, not theirs and not mine. Do you want to become vampire? Do you want immortality, even knowing what it costs?" Mira thought about it, really thought. Vampirism would mean leaving her human life behind, abandoning her career, her friends, her family. It would mean drinking blood, avoiding sunlight, existing in a world of politics and danger she barely understood. But it would also mean staying with Wolfram forever, never having to face the separation that his immortality guaranteed. "I don't know," she admitted. I never wanted to be vampire, Wolfram. I wanted to be with you for as long as I could, to make the time we had count. But if the alternative is losing you entirely—" "We do not have to accept their terms," Wolfram interrupted. "There is another option." "What?" "I step down as king," Wolfram said. "I abdicate, give up my title and territory, and we leave. We go somewhere the council has no authority, live quietly, stay together for the years you have left. When you die, I will grieve, and then I will decide what comes next. But we do not let them dictate our choices." "You would give up being king?" Mira asked, shocked. "For me?" "I would give up everything for you," Wolfram said simply. "I was king for 7 centuries before I met you, Mira, and it brought me nothing but duty and isolation. You brought me joy. You brought me back to life. If I have to choose between a crown and your happiness, there is no choice at all." Mira felt tears sliding down her face. "I can't ask you to do that." "You are not asking," Wolfram said. "I am offering, and I would make the offer gladly, if it is what you want." They stood together in the fading light, and Mira weighed the options. Transformation would give them forever, but would cost her humanity. Abdication would give them decades, but would cost Wolfram his position. Separation would cost them everything. And then, slowly, a third option began to form in her mind. "What if," Mira said carefully, "we called their bluff?" "What do you mean?" "They're threatening us because they think you're weak, vulnerable. But what if you're not? What if we show them that our bond makes you stronger, not weaker, that I'm not a liability, but an asset?" Wolfram frowned. "I am not certain I follow." "You said you've been disengaged from vampire society for 2 centuries, Mira said. "But you've been re-engaging because of me, attending meetings, making decisions, hiring staff. The council wants to know if you're still fit to rule, so show them. Call a full council meeting, bring me with you, and demonstrate that you're more capable now than you were in isolation. Prove that I make you better, not worse." "That is dangerous," Wolfram said. "Bringing you into a room full of vampires, many of whom would see you as prey or threat." "I'm already in danger," Mira interrupted. "They've already threatened me. But if we can convince the council that our relationship is beneficial to vampire society, they have no grounds to interfere." Wolfram considered it, his expression thoughtful. "It could work. But Mira, if it does not, if the council rejects our argument, they could move against you immediately. I would fight them, but I cannot fight the entire council." "Then we make sure it works," Mira said. "We prepare, we plan, we show them exactly what they need to see." Slowly, Wolfram nodded. "Very well. We call a council meeting, and we change the rules of this game." The next week was spent in intense preparation. Wolfram coached Mira on vampire politics, protocol, the various council members and their positions. He taught her how to stand in a room full of predators without showing fear, how to speak with authority despite being human, how to present herself as someone worthy of a king's attention. "You must be confident but not arrogant," Wolfram said. "Respectful but not submissive. You represent not just yourself but me, and by extension the future of how vampires interact with humanity. It is a significant burden." I can handle it, Mira said, and she believed it. They also worked on the argument they would present. The case was simple. Wolfram's relationship with Mira had made him a better ruler, more engaged and effective, and therefore the council should support it rather than oppose it. They gathered evidence records of Wolfram's recent activities, testimony from vampires who had noticed his increased involvement, proof that his territory was better managed now than it had been in decades. The council values strength and stability above all else, Wolfram explained. If we can demonstrate that you provide both, they will have difficulty arguing against us. The council meeting was held in a building Mira had passed 100 times without realizing what it was, a nondescript office tower in the city, its basement levels converted into a vampire court. Wolfram drove them there at night, and as they descended into the underground chambers, Mira felt her nervousness spike. "Stay close to me," Wolfram murmured. "Do not engage with anyone unless I indicate it is safe. And remember, you are under my protection. No one will touch you without facing my wrath." The council chamber was dramatic and intimidating, a circular room with a high ceiling, lit by chandeliers, ringed with chairs where council members sat. At the center was a raised platform where Wolfram and Mira stood, visible to all. There were perhaps 20 vampires present, all pale and beautiful and watching with predatory focus. Gregor Thorne sat among them, his expression neutral. Others Mira did not recognize, but she could feel their power, the weight of centuries pressing down on the room. Wolfram stood beside her, every inch the king, his posture regal and his expression composed. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "I have called this council to address the concerns that have been raised regarding my relationship with Mira Keller," Wolfram said, "and to make clear that those concerns are baseless." Gregor leaned forward. "You have been isolated for 2 centuries, Your Majesty. Your sudden attachment to a human has raised questions about your judgment." "My judgment," Wolfram said coldly, "has been proven sound across 7 centuries of rule. I withdrew from active governance because I no longer saw value in engagement, not because I was incapable. Now, through Mira, I have rediscovered that value. I am more present, more effective, more committed to my responsibilities than I have been in 200 years. That is not weakness, Gregor. That is growth. Growth that comes from dependence on a mortal," another council member interjected. "What happens when she dies? You will collapse again, retreat again, and we will be left managing the aftermath." "Perhaps," Wolfram said. "Or perhaps I will grieve and then continue, having learned that engagement with the world is worthwhile despite its costs. But that is speculation about a future decades away. Right now, in this moment, I am your king, and I am stronger for Mira's presence. That is what you should care about." "We care about stability," Gregor said. "And a mortal bond is inherently unstable." "Then let me offer you stability," Mira said, and every vampire in the room turned to stare at her. She met their gazes without flinching, channeling every ounce of confidence Wolfram had taught her. "I am a cartographer. I document the world, find what is lost, create order from chaos. That is what I have done for Wolfram. I found him when he was lost, mapped his isolation, and helped him create order in his life again. I am not a liability. I am the reason he is here at all." "Bold words for a human," Gregor said. "True words," Mira corrected. "And if you cannot see the value in that, then you are not as wise as you pretend to be." There was a moment of tense silence. Then, unexpectedly, one of the older council members laughed, a sharp, bright sound in the quiet room. "She has spirit," the woman said. "I like her, and she is right, Gregor. Wolfram has been more active in the past months than in the past decades. If his mortal has inspired that, we should be grateful, not combative." "Grateful," Gregor repeated sourly, "for a human who will age and die and leave us with a grieving king." "I would rather have a grieving king who remembers how to feel," the woman said, "than an empty king who has forgotten why he rules at all." She looked at Wolfram. "You have my support, Your Majesty. Do what makes you happy." Other council members murmured agreement. Not all of them, Gregor and a few others, remained clearly opposed, but enough that Mira could see the tide turning. "We will take a vote," Gregor said finally. "All in favor of allowing the king's relationship with the human to continue without interference, indicate now." Hands rose around the room. Mira counted quickly, 14 in favor, 6 opposed, a clear majority. "The council has spoken," Wolfram said, and his voice held triumph. "My relationship with Mira Keller is recognized and will not be interfered with. This matter is closed." Gregor looked furious but nodded stiffly. "As you say, Your Majesty." The meeting ended, and Wolfram led Mira out of the chamber, his hand firm on her back. They did not speak until they reached the car, and then Wolfram pulled her into a fierce embrace. "You were magnificent," he said. "Absolutely magnificent." "We did it," Mira said, laughing with relief. "We actually convinced them." "You convinced them," Wolfram corrected. "Your speech, your confidence, your refusal to be intimidated, that is what won the vote." He kissed her, hard and claiming, "I am so proud of you." They drove back to the estate, and that night they celebrated with wine and music and lovemaking that felt like a reclaiming of their future. The council had tried to separate them and failed. They were free, together, and no one could take that away. The seasons turned. Spring became summer, became autumn. Mira continued her work, dividing her time between her job in the city and weekends at the estate. Wolfram became more active in vampire society, attending regular council meetings, making rulings, taking his responsibilities seriously in a way he had not in centuries. And their relationship deepened, the bond between them growing stronger with every shared moment. It was late autumn when Wolfram asked her to move into the estate permanently. They were walking through the gardens, the leaves turning gold and red around them, and he said it casually, as if he were commenting on the weather. "I would like you to live here. Not just visit, but live. Make this your home." Mira stopped walking. "Wolfram, you could keep your job if you wish," he continued. "Commute from here or work remotely. I know your career is important to you, but I want to wake every night with you beside me, Mira. I want to share my life with you completely, not in stolen weekends, but in every moment." He turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. "I know it is asking a great deal, but I am asking nonetheless." Mira thought about her apartment in the city, cramped and impersonal. Thought about the estate, vast and beautiful and filled with Wolfram's presence. Thought about the life she could have here, mapping a place that belonged to her as much as to him, loving a man who would walk through centuries just to keep her safe. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll move in." Wolfram's smile was radiant. He picked her up, spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. "You have made me happier than I thought possible," he said, setting her down gently. "I will spend every remaining moment of your life ensuring you never regret this choice." She moved in over the following month, bringing her possessions, her books, her surveying equipment. The estate absorbed her life easily, rooms opening to accommodate her needs, the space transforming from Wolfram's home to their home. They fell into routines. Mira worked during the day, either remotely or driving into the city when necessary. Wolfram slept, sequestered in his light-proof chambers, and woke at dusk to find her waiting. They had dinner together, Mira eating, Wolfram keeping her company. They walked the grounds, talked about their days, made love in the enormous bed they now shared. The staff, carefully chosen humans who knew what Wolfram was, treated Mira with respect and warmth, clearly pleased that their employer had found happiness. They maintained the estate during daylight hours, ensuring everything ran smoothly, and disappeared discreetly when Wolfram and Mira wanted privacy. It was, Mira thought, as close to perfect as life could be. But she was still human, and time was still passing. 2 years after she moved in, Mira noticed the first signs of aging. Small things, a few strands of gray in her dark hair, lines forming around her eyes, her body taking slightly longer to recover from physical exertion. She was only 30, but the contrast between her aging and Wolfram's unchanging nature was becoming visible. Wolfram noticed too. She caught him sometimes, watching her with an expression of carefully controlled grief. as if he were trying to memorize every detail before time stole them away. "I'm not dying," she told him one night, catching his gaze. "I'm just getting older. It's normal." "I know," Wolfram said quietly. "But I am watching the clock count down to losing you, Mira, and there is nothing normal about that." "We have decades left," Mira said. "Decades are nothing," Wolfram said. "I have lived for 7 centuries. Decades pass like weeks. I will blink, and you will be 50, then 60, then 70, and then gone. And I will remain, unchanging, alone again." "Then we make the decades count," Mira said, taking his hands. "We live fully, love completely, and we don't waste time mourning a future that hasn't happened yet." "You are wiser than I am," Wolfram said, "for all my centuries." They did make it count. They traveled together, carefully, to places where Wolfram could move safely at night. They threw a party at the estate, inviting vampire council members and human friends both, creating a space where their two worlds could meet. They built a life that was rich and full and deeply happy. And then, 5 years after Mira moved in, something changed. She was in the estate archives, researching property records for a work project, when she found an old journal from the early 1800s written in Eleanor's hand. Wolfram had shown her some of Eleanor's writings before, but this journal had been tucked away separately, clearly intentional. Curious, Mira opened it and began to read. The entries were dated from late 1802, just months before Eleanor's death. They described her growing fear that hunters were closing in, her sense of being watched, her desperate attempts to protect Wolfram. And then, near the end, an entry that made Mira's breath catch. "W offered me transformation tonight, said he could not bear to lose me, that he wanted me with him forever. I refused. How could I accept immortality knowing it would chain him to me eternally? He deserves freedom, deserves the possibility of finding another love in the centuries to come. My mortality is a gift, not a curse. It will force him to let me go, to move forward, to live beyond our brief time together. I told him I would rather die human and beloved than live forever and become a burden. He wept, but he accepted my choice. I pray it was the right one." Mira read the entry 3 times, her mind reeling. Eleanor had refused transformation deliberately, believing it would be better for Wolfram if she died. And her death had destroyed him for 2 centuries. She found Wolfram in the library, reading by candlelight, and handed him the journal without a word. He read the entry, his expression crumbling. "I had forgotten she wrote this," he said finally. "Or perhaps I blocked it out. She thought she was giving me a gift, Mira. She thought her death would free me, but it did the opposite." "I'm not Eleanor," Mira said quietly. "No," Wolfram agreed. "You are not. You are fiercer, more stubborn, more willing to fight for what you want, and I am grateful for that." "Would you have turned her?" Mira asked. "If she had said yes?" "In a heartbeat," Wolfram said. "I offered because I could not imagine existing without her. She refused because she could not imagine burdening me with her forever. We were both trying to protect each other, and it led to tragedy." Mira sat down beside him, thinking, "I don't want to make the same mistake." "What do you mean?" "Eleanor thought refusing transformation was protecting you," Mira said. "But it hurt you more than anything else could have. And I've been thinking about aging, about time, about the fact that I'm going to leave you eventually whether I want to or not." She took a breath. "I don't want to die, Wolfram. I don't want to leave you. I want to stay." Wolfram went very still. "Mira." "I know you said you'd never turn anyone," Mira interrupted. "I know you see vampirism as a curse, but I've lived with you for 5 years, and I've seen what your life is like. The beauty, the knowledge, the time to learn and grow and become more than you were. That doesn't seem like a curse to me. It seems like an opportunity." "You would give up your humanity?" Wolfram asked, his voice shaking. "Your mortality, your family, your entire world?" "I would give it up to stay with you," Mira said. "Not because you're asking, but because I'm choosing. The council offered me transformation as a threat, and I rejected it, but now I'm offering it to myself as a gift. Turn me, Wolfram. Make me vampire. Let me spend eternity with you." Wolfram closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet with tears he could not shed. Are you certain? Absolutely certain? Because once done, it cannot be undone. I'm certain, Mira said. I've never been more certain of anything. It will hurt, Wolfram warned. The transformation is agonizing, 3 days of pain as your body dies and remakes itself. And afterward, you will be different, stronger, faster, but also other. You will need blood to survive. You will never see sunlight again. You will watch everyone you know age and die while you remain. Are you prepared for that? Yes, Mira said simply. Wolfram pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you, he said fiercely. I love you more than I thought I could love anything, and I will make you vampire because you ask it, because I am selfish enough to want to keep you forever. But Mira, if you have even a moment of doubt, I don't, Mira said. I want this. I want you. I want forever. Then you shall have it, Wolfram said. They chose the new moon for the transformation, a night of darkness to mark the ending of one life and the beginning of another. Wolfram prepared her carefully, explaining exactly what would happen, what she would feel, how long it would take. I will be with you the entire time, he promised. I will not leave you, not for a moment. And when you wake as vampire, I will be there to guide you through every step. Mira contacted her family, telling them she was taking an extended trip abroad, disconnecting her phone, tying up the loose ends of her mortal life. She quit her job, donated her possessions, said quiet goodbyes to the few friends she had maintained. It felt like preparing for death, and in a way, it was. On the night of the new moon, Wolfram led her to his bedroom, the space where they had shared so much of their life together. He had prepared everything the bed made with fresh linens, candles lit around the room, a final human meal waiting if she wanted it. Are you ready? He asked. I'm ready, Mira said. Wolfram kissed her, deep and desperate, and then guided her to the bed. I will drain you almost to death, he explained, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. And then I will give you my blood. It will remake you, cell by cell, into vampire. The process takes 3 days. I will stay with you, monitor you, ensure you survive. Do you understand? I understand, Mira said. Then we begin. He bit into her throat, and this time it was different, not the gentle feeding they had shared before, but a deep, draining pull that took her life in steady swallows. Mira felt herself growing weak, cold, her heartbeat slowing. The world started to fade, gray creeping in from the edges of her vision. And then Wolfram pulled away, bit into his own wrist, and pressed the bleeding wound to her mouth. Drink, he commanded. She drank. His blood was strange, cool and metallic and powerful, and it burned as it went down. But she swallowed and swallowed, taking in his life, his power, his immortality. And then the pain began. It was like being unmade from the inside out, every cell screaming as it died and was reborn. Mira heard herself crying out, felt Wolfram's arms around her, heard his voice speaking words of comfort and encouragement. But the pain was everything, consuming, endless. She lost track of time. Hours blurred into each other, pain the only constant. Sometimes she was aware of Wolfram beside her, his cool hands on her face, his voice in her ear. Sometimes she was lost in fever dreams, visions of her life and death tangled together. On the 3rd day, the pain began to fade. Mira became aware of her body again, noticing how different it felt, stronger, sharper, more. She opened her eyes and found the room impossibly bright despite the dim candlelight. Every detail was crisp, clear, vivid. And Wolfram was there, watching her with an expression of such relief and joy that it hurt to see. Mira, he breathed. Welcome back. She tried to speak and found her throat dry. Wolfram held a glass to her lips and she drank, tasting blood for the first time and finding it not repulsive, as she had feared, but necessary. Her body demanded it, craved it, needed it like oxygen. How do you feel? Wolfram asked. Mira took stock. Her body felt strong, powerful, every sense heightened beyond belief. She could hear Wolfram's lack of heartbeat, smell the blood in the glass, see individual dust motes floating in the air. It was overwhelming and exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Different, she said, and her voice came out stronger than before, clearer. I feel different. You are vampire now, Wolfram said. Immortal, powerful, mine, if you will still have me. Always, Mira said. She sat up, finding the movement effortless despite 3 days of lying still. I chose this. I chose you. That hasn't changed. Wolfram pulled her into his arms, and she held him back with her new strength, feeling for the first time like his equal rather than something fragile he had to protect. They stayed like that for a long time, two immortals embracing in the candlelight. Over the following weeks, Wolfram taught her everything she needed to survive. How to feed safely, taking blood from donors or blood banks without killing, how to move with her new speed and strength without causing damage, how to endure the absence of sunlight, the isolation from humanity, the weight of immortality. It was difficult, sometimes overwhelming, but Mira adapted. She had always been good at finding her way through new territory, and vampirism was just another landscape to map and understand. The council was informed of her transformation, and they sent representatives to verify it was done properly. Gregor Thorne came himself, examining Mira with clinical precision before nodding approval. She is vampire, he confirmed, properly turned, stable, bonded to the king. The council recognizes her as legitimate. I do not require the council's recognition, Wolfram said coldly, but I appreciate the courtesy nonetheless. After the representatives left, Wolfram took Mira's hand. How does it feel to be acknowledged by vampire society? Strange, Mira admitted. I'm the same person I was, but now I'm acceptable because I'm immortal. You were always acceptable, Wolfram said. They simply could not see it. Mira and Wolfram settled into their new life together, and for the first time in 2 centuries, Wolfram allowed himself to imagine a future that did not end in loss. They had eternity now, endless time to learn and grow and love, and Wolfram kept his promise from years earlier. He chose to be findable again. It started small. He allowed Mira to add the estate back to her private maps, creating a complete survey that documented every detail of his property. Then, carefully, he began reconnecting with the world. He had the access road repaired and properly marked, not hidden, but simply private. He registered the estate in modern land records under a shell corporation that protected his identity, but made the property officially real. And one spring evening, exactly 7 years after Mira had first walked through his gates, Wolfram threw open the doors of his mansion and welcomed guests for the first time in 2 centuries. It was not a large gathering, just the vampire council members who had supported them, a few trusted human allies, the estate staff and their families. But it was enough to fill the entrance hall with laughter and conversation, to bring life back to rooms that had been silent for too long. Mira stood beside Wolfram, greeting guests, and she saw the change in him. He was more present, more engaged, more alive than she had ever seen him. The isolation that had defined him for 200 years was finally, truly broken. Thank you, Wolfram said quietly, during a lull in the evening, for finding me, for refusing to let me hide, for giving me a reason to be findable again. You don't have to thank me, Mira said. I didn't do anything except walk down an old road. You did everything, Wolfram corrected. He pulled her close, kissing her in front of all their guests, claiming her publicly and proudly. You found me when I was lost. You loved me when I'd forgotten how to be loved. You gave me forever, and I will spend every moment of it grateful. The party continued late into the night, and when the last guest departed, Mira and Wolfram stood together on the mansion steps, looking out over the grounds. The estate was no longer hidden, no longer erased from the world's memory. It existed, solid and real and findable, a place where a vampire king and his beloved lived together in defiant happiness. What do we do now? Mira asked. Now, Wolfram said, pulling her back inside, we live, fully, completely, together. We make maps and music and meaning. We welcome guests and build community. We love each other across the centuries and refuse to regret a single moment. That sounds perfect, Mira said. And it was. The years that followed were rich and full. Mira continued her cartography work, now specializing in vampire properties, documenting the hidden estates and territories of immortals who wanted their land properly surveyed. She became known in vampire society as the map maker who could find anything, whose work was impeccable, and whose discretion was absolute. Wolfram resumed his full duties as king, but with Mira beside him, he found the work meaningful rather than burdensome. Together, they modernized vampire society's approach to human interaction, creating protocols that protected both species while allowing for genuine connection. The council, seeing the success of their relationship, gradually opened to the idea of other vampire-human pairings, other paths beyond isolation or transformation. They traveled the world together, visiting places Wolfram had seen centuries before and showing Mira how they had changed. They collected art and music and knowledge, filling the estate with treasures that spanned cultures and eras. And they loved each other with the kind of depth that only immortality could provide, knowing they would never run out of time to learn, to grow, to discover new aspects of each other. 50 years after Mira's transformation, on the anniversary of the night she had first walked through the gates, Wolfram took her to the spot where they had first met. The gates had been replaced with something more elegant, more welcoming, but the location was the same. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, "choosing this life?" Mira looked at him, her love, her partner, her forever, and smiled. "Never. Not for a single moment." "Good," Wolfram said, "because I have something for you." He handed her a document, official and stamped and clearly important. Mira scanned it and gasped. It was a deed transfer, making her co-owner of the estate, equal partner in everything Wolfram possessed. "We have shared this life for 50 years, Wolfram said. "It is time we shared it officially. The estate is yours as much as mine, Mira. Our home, our territory, our future. Together." "Together," Mira agreed, tears of joy on her face. They walked back to the mansion hand in hand, past gardens they had planted together, through doors that welcomed them both. Inside, the staff had prepared a celebration, flowers and music and blood wine, a party just for the two of them. And as they danced together in the entrance hall where she had first seen him 700 years into his immortal life, Mira thought about the whispers that had once surrounded this place. No woman could find his estate, the locals had said, but she had found it. Found him, found the love that would define both their eternities. The estate was no longer lost. Wolfram was no longer lost. And Mira, who had spent her mortal life finding hidden places and forgotten roads, had finally found where she belonged. They kissed in the candlelight, immortal and together and infinitely happy, and outside the estate sat visible on the hillside, its roads clear and findable, a testament to love that refused to hide. The Vampire King had said, "She found me," and in finding him, Mira had found herself. They would spend eternity being findable together, doors open, hearts full, bound by choice and blood and the kind of love that could unmake isolation and remake the world. And they lived, truly lived, forever after.